Nepal is often imagined as a serene Himalayan kingdom, home to snow-capped peaks, Buddhist monasteries, and ancient traditions. But beneath the image of prayer flags fluttering against mountain skies lies another reality. A hidden economy powered by smuggling networks, drug cartels, and untouchable families who have turned geography and corruption into vast criminal empires. Squeezed between India and China, Nepal has always been a crossroads for trade. But where legal goods cross borders, so do heroin, hashish, gold, wildlife, and counterfeit money. For decades, crime families have exploited the porous borders, weak institutions, and booming demand for drugs and contraband. They operate with the precision of businessmen, the ruthlessness of warlords, and the cunning of politicians, shielded by layers of protection, loyalty, and influence. In this countdown, we reveal the top 5 richest criminal families in Nepal, their estimated fortunes, their empires, and why they remain untouchable in one of Asia's most strategically placed nations. 5. The Terai gold smuggling families. Net worth $50 to $100 million. Along Nepal's southern plains, the Terai region, smuggling is not a side business. It is the economy. For generations, families along the India-Nepal border have run gold, silver, and contraband across checkpoints, evading customs and bribing officials. Gold is the crown jewel of this trade. With India's insatiable appetite for gold and high import duties, Nepal became the perfect corridor for smuggling shipments into Indian markets. These families have perfected the system. Couriers carry gold bricks hidden in false car panels, women strap bullion to their bodies, and truckloads of grain conceal kilograms of smuggled metal. Once in India, the gold fetches massive profits, laundered back through businesses in Birgunj, Janakpur, and border towns. The money is invested in petrol pumps, transport companies, and warehouses, turning illicit fortunes into legitimate empires. The wealth is not flashy. These families avoid public attention. But their quiet dynasties thrive, controlling both sides of the border. Their strength lies not just in their gold, but in their political connections, local officials, customs officers, and even police who look the other way. Attempts to dismantle their networks rarely succeed, because in the Terai, smuggling isn't crime, it's tradition, wrapped in family loyalty and cross-border power. 4. The Kathmandu Hashish and Club Dynasties. Net worth $100 to $150 million. In the 1960s and 70s, Kathmandu wasn't just a stop on the hippie trail, it was the global capital of counterculture. Western travelers, lured by tales of spirituality and cheap cannabis, flooded into the city's narrow streets, especially into Jochan Tole, soon nicknamed Freak Street. There, government-licensed hashish shops openly sold some of the world's most potent marijuana, grown in the fertile Himalayan valleys. Nepal's cannabis quickly gained an international reputation, and the money it brought in helped fuel a brief golden age of tourism. For a while, hashish wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated, woven into Nepal's image as a mystical haven. But that golden age didn't last. Under mounting US diplomatic pressure in the mid-1970s, Nepal banned the trade. The famous hashish shops were shuttered, Freak Street emptied of its backpacker pilgrims, and the government hoped the problem would disappear. Instead, it created something far more powerful. The cannabis economy didn't vanish. It simply went underground. Families that once legally sold hashish in storefronts turned their businesses into hidden empires, cultivating not only cannabis, but also opium poppies in remote valleys far from the reach of authorities. With militias protecting crops and smugglers running routes through mountain passes, the trade adapted and grew in sophistication. By the 1980s, these families had refined their networks. Smugglers carried kilos of hashish on mule trains, Trekkers served as unwitting couriers, and international traffickers made Kathmandu a hub for shipments bound for Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. The profits were immense, and with the collapse of government oversight, crime families seized total control. By the 1990s, as Nepal opened further to tourism and urban development, these dynasties saw a new opportunity. Kathmandu's booming nightlife, nightclubs, dance bars, and even casinos became perfect fronts. Behind the flashing lights and blaring music, drug money was laundered, protection rackets were enforced, and new markets were cultivated among locals and foreign visitors alike. Today, their empires stretch across layers of society. On the streets of Tamil, small dealers sell hashish to curious backpackers, feeding the illusion that the trade is just small-scale and harmless. But behind them sit family bosses who own entire buildings, sprawling real estate holdings, and construction firms that double as money laundering machines. The international trade remains their real treasure. Shipments of Nepali hashish, still prized for its quality, find their way into underground markets from Amsterdam's coffee shops to Bangkok's hidden clubs. Opium, too, continues to flow quietly through their networks, often traded in bulk to syndicates across India and beyond. What makes these dynasties particularly dangerous is their lack of reliance on violence. Unlike the blood-soaked turf wars of Cape Town or the cartel executions of Mexico, Kathmandu's underworld thrives on influence rather than open conflict. Their weapon is subtle: connections. Politicians are seen attending their nightclubs and parties. Police are rumored to provide escorts for their events, or look the other way when raids are scheduled. Judges and bureaucrats have been quietly co-opted over the decades. This strategy of embedding themselves into the very fabric of Nepal's social and political scene makes them almost invisible as criminals and almost impossible to prosecute. For many locals, these families represent an open secret. Everyone knows where the drugs are sold, who controls the clubs, and which families own half the nightlife district. But few dare speak openly. Their wealth buys silence as much as it buys property. They sponsor religious festivals, fund local charities, and hand out donations during election seasons, cementing their image as successful businessmen rather than criminal overlords. In Kathmandu, where the line between legality and illegality blurs, these families hold the keys not only to the city's dance floors and neon-lit nightclubs, but also to the corridors of political power. Their story is one of adaptation, turning a global crackdown into a private dynasty, and transforming hashish from a counterculture curiosity into the foundation of an empire that still thrives in the shadows of the Himalayas. 3. The tiger and rhino horn syndicates. Net worth 200 to 250 million. Nepal's majestic wildlife, tigers prowling through dense jungles, rhinos grazing in riverine grasslands, and elusive leopards stalking mountain slopes, has long made the country a paradise for tourists and conservationists. But for decades, the same animals that draw foreign visitors with cameras have drawn another kind of visitor: poachers and smugglers. Behind the trade in rhino horns, tiger skins, leopard pelts, and exotic animal parts lie tightly knit family syndicates who turned Nepal's biodiversity into billions of rupees, supplying black markets across China, Tibet, and Southeast Asia. The foundations of these dynasties were laid in the late 20th century, when Nepal's borders were porous and law enforcement was both underfunded and corruptible. In regions like Chitwan and Bardia, poaching became an industry rather than an isolated crime. Local hunters provided the manpower, corrupt park officials ensured safe passage, and family bosses controlled the logistics, moving contraband across mountain passes into Tibet or eastward through India toward booming Chinese markets. The numbers were staggering. A single rhino horn, carved into ornaments or powdered for use in traditional medicine, could sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Tiger skins became status symbols for the elite in China and Southeast Asia. Multiply these profits across decades of trafficking, and the families behind the trade amassed fortunes that rivaled legal industries. But these syndicates were never content with just poaching. With growing wealth, they diversified. Transport companies provided legitimate covers for smuggling operations, moving animal parts alongside goods in trucks that crisscrossed the country. Hotels and resorts, ironically marketed as eco-friendly lodges, were bought up to launder money from the illegal trade. Export firms dealing in timber, tea, or handicrafts became fronts for moving contraband out of Nepal. Some families even went so far as to sponsor conservation projects, donating land or funding wildlife reserves. To the public, these gestures painted them as benefactors of nature. In reality, the same families quietly financed the poaching rings, devastating the very species they claimed to protect. International crackdowns brought some pressure. High-profile raids seized rhino horns, leopard skins, and tiger bones, while NGOs and conservation groups spotlighted Nepal as a battlefield against wildlife trafficking. Yet, despite these efforts, the trade continues, only more hidden, more sophisticated. Syndicates adapted by expanding into parallel black markets, illegal timber, sandalwood, and even human smuggling. Entire forests have been stripped bare under their command, with logs funneled into India and China, while sandalwood, highly prized for incense and oils, has become another lucrative commodity. For these families, wildlife trafficking was just the beginning. Once the networks of bribery, transport, and laundering were established, they became multi-industry empires of smuggling. Their wealth today is not measured solely in cash, but in the quiet power of influence. They own sprawling land holdings in Terai towns, luxury apartments in Kathmandu, and tourist resorts near national parks. They funnel money into political campaigns, ensuring allies sit in parliament and local government. Donations to schools, temples, and charities buy community loyalty. And because their businesses are deeply woven into the economy, they operate with near impunity. To the average Nepali, they are hoteliers, contractors, and respected businessmen. To conservationists and investigators, they are the silent wildlife kings, dynasties thriving on extinction, whose empires rest on the bones of Nepal's most endangered creatures. 2. The Kathmandu Underworld brothers, net worth $300 to $400 million. Every city has its underworld figures, but in Kathmandu, certain family networks have elevated gangsterism into dynastic wealth. Known in whispers as the Brothers, these clans control protection rackets, gambling, and smuggling pipelines that run through the capital. Their roots stretch back to the Civil War era, when chaos gave them cover to expand their operations. Their empire is built on multiple foundations. Gambling dens and illegal casinos provide steady income. Nightclubs and bars serve as both cash laundries and drug distribution hubs. Their control extends into construction contracts, trucking fleets, and land grabs on the city's rapidly expanding outskirts. With Kathmandu booming, real estate became their biggest weapon, buying cheap, grabbing land through intimidation, and flipping it into multi-million-dollar developments. What sets these families apart is their proximity to politics. Their money funds election campaigns, their enforcers double as political muscle, and their influence stretches into parliament. Court cases vanish, investigations stall, and rivals disappear. Their wealth is visible. Luxury SUVs on Kathmandu's crowded streets, mansions in the valley, children educated abroad. They are the face of a new kind of Nepali gangster. Not just smugglers or street thugs, but businessmen politicians, whose fortunes blur the line between state and underworld. For many, they are untouchable, because their empire is not hidden. It is embedded in the very system meant to stop them. 1. The Trans-Himalayan Heroin and Yarsagumba Cartels. Net worth more than $500 million. At the very top of Nepal's underworld sit the Trans-Himalayan Dynasties, families who control both the heroin pipelines and the trade in Yarsagumba, the rare caterpillar fungus often nicknamed Himalayan Viagra. Unlike the smaller local syndicates, these are not just smugglers. They are borderland empires who turned Nepal's unique geography into their most powerful weapon. From the snowy passes of Mustang to the bustling border towns of Biratnagar and Nepal Gunj, they have mastered the art of using Nepal's terrain, politics, and poverty to move contraband across Asia. Heroin is their crown jewel. Nepal's position between the Golden Triangle of Myanmar and the opium fields of Afghanistan makes it an ideal corridor. From the east, refined heroin trickles in through Burma and northeast India. From the west, Afghan heroin is pushed across Pakistan and funneled into Nepal through porous Terai borders. Once inside, the Dynasties' networks take over, an army of couriers carrying small packets hidden in trucks, buses, or even strapped to their bodies. Brokers who coordinate shipments through Kathmandu safe houses, and enforcers who make sure debts are collected and rivals silenced. Each consignment can be worth millions of dollars, dwarfing the profits of legitimate trade and creating fortunes that rival entire Nepali industries. Yet heroin is only half the story. In the high-altitude meadows of Dolfa and Manang grows Yarsagumba, a strange hybrid of caterpillar and fungus prized in Chinese medicine as an aphrodisiac and energy booster. Harvested during short summer windows, it is so valuable that villagers risk their lives climbing treacherous slopes to collect it. A single kilo can fetch $30,000 to $50,000 in Chinese markets, more expensive than gold. The families who control access to the harvesting zones, who pay off local leaders and secure mountain passes for export, have built staggering wealth. They buy the fungus from desperate collectors for a fraction of its final price, then move it through their smuggling networks to Lhasa, Chengdu, or even Beijing. The profit margins are obscene, and the business is seasonal but endlessly renewable. Every spring, new waves of villagers scour the meadows, feeding the dynasty's coffers. With heroin and Yarsagumba combined, these syndicates sit on rivers of money, and they have learned to launder it with sophistication. Their investments run through Kathmandu banks, hidden in export-import companies, or funneled into Dubai real estate and offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Hotels in Pokhara, trucking companies in the Terai, and even small hydroelectric projects have quietly been financed by drug and fungus profits. On the surface, they appear as legitimate tycoons, respected businessmen whose names are attached to banks, airlines, and schools. In reality, the cash fueling their expansion comes from narcotics and black market fungi. What makes these dynasties nearly untouchable is their integration into transnational criminal networks. They are not isolated Nepali families, they are nodes in a global system. Chinese brokers handle their Yarsagumba sales, Indian mafia syndicates protect heroin corridors into Delhi and Mumbai, and European traffickers arrange shipments onward to Paris, London, and Milan. This web of cooperation means that even when Nepali authorities attempt crackdowns, the cartels simply reroute their operations, backed by international allies who ensure the flow never stops. Their political reach is equally formidable. Through campaign donations, bribes, and intimidation, these families have penetrated border security forces, customs agencies, and even government ministries. Trucks loaded with heroin or fungus pass checkpoints with little more than a handshake. Permits for legitimate exports are issued with no questions asked. Senior politicians publicly condemn trafficking while privately taking campaign funds from the very dynasties who orchestrate it. For villagers in the Himalayas, these families appear as patrons, providing jobs, schools, and charity projects. For police and politicians, they are untouchable power brokers. For conservationists and investigators, they are the invisible rulers of Nepal's shadow economy. Together, Heroin and Yarsagumba have transformed the trans-Himalayan dynasties into some of the wealthiest and most dangerous families in Nepal. Their story is not just about smuggling. It is about how geography, poverty, and global demand combined to create a criminal aristocracy that operates in plain sight, richer than many legal industries, more powerful than local governments, and more elusive than justice itself. Together, the Heroin and Yarsagumba dynasties represent the peak of Nepal's underworld, blending ancient trade routes with modern drug cartels. Their fortunes easily surpass $500 million, but their true power lies in influence. They decide who gets rich, who gets silenced, and who controls the mountain corridors that have carried contraband for centuries.